Hello and welcome. These are horse racing selections for Wednesday, the 14th of February. It's Valentine's Day for some. I am Flat Cap Callum and I'm hoping you are all very, very well. Okay, I'm expecting this. I mean, you'll know by the amount of time that the video says, but I'm expecting it to probably be a bit of a longer video. There wasn't really any of them last week. So I've got a few bits I'm going to go through, including, so we've got Wednesday's bets. We are going to start off, we're going to start off on the attack a little bit on this week. So we are £23 staking plan. We have been struggling to get north of £20 on many days last few weeks, but yeah, I've got a £23 staking plan for Wednesday. It is a little bit on the fiddly side in regards to there's actually 5 bets, because one of them is one horse single on its own, which is a bit of an extra place market potential, but I'll talk about that. So it's one single on its own. There's 2 main bets, one main bet Canadian Dundalk with one at Fontwell if Fontwell's on. And then we've got a main bet Yankee at Kempton, and then mixed in we've got the best 2 from the 2 main bets in a double, and I've got combination double on the 2 mile-and-a-half handicaps at Dundalk. So a bit of an interest. I think it's 10 races, 12 selections. So yeah, that's the plan. Outlook for this week as well is a bit more interesting as long as the weather doesn't rain too much. I know there's a few risks out there, but there's currently 6 meetings on Thursday, Friday and Saturday, if they're all on, that I'll have an interest in, certainly. And then Sunday's got 4 meetings on because it's another trial of the Sunday evening stuff, and it's Kempton Park this Sunday night. So yeah, I think hopefully a bit more of an interest. So plan for this video is I'll do the review from Saturday and anything comments and golf and that kind of stuff. There is no golf this week, so I mentioned that in the comments. There's only one tournament. It's only over in the US, and I wasn't keen from a betting point of view on it, so I've left it. So personally, no bets on the golf at all this week. Expecting there may be a bit of small interest next week. I've already started to have a look ahead for next week, and probably small interest next week, but no golf this week because I didn't like it. So I've got the review, and then we'll do Wednesday's bets, and then there was 3 other topics. One was a quick one. I'm just going to give you a bit of a Cheltenham Festival anti-post update on some of our selections. Second thing was there were some questions. I think Derek was asking in the comments about being out of the weights and out of the handicap and stuff, and it's on my topics of things I'll do an extra video on at some point, probably when I'm having my break, but I'll give a fairly quick answer. I know Gerard was really helpful in trying to answer that, so I'll give a bit of an overview of that. And at the end of the video, it's really for those core loyal followers who like the stats. I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive into some of the stats, some types of stats that I've probably not gone into before. I'm going to try and pitch it that that doesn't go over absolutely everybody's heads, but health warning, it is really for those kind of particularly, if you're just here for a couple of tips and see what I'm doing, that's fine. It'll probably be too much for you. If you're somebody who likes the stats, it might be interesting to you, and if you're somebody who is sort of foraging your own way through the betting world and always kind of looking for insight of other people, it might be useful to you in terms of some of the things that I would look at as a matter of course. So stats to come for those that love a stats fan. All right, the review, that won't take very long. Review from Saturday was not great. We had Doddy the Great and that was as great as it got. Placed in the Betfair hurdle, that was the number 1 pick. Got nothing else with it. It ended another poor week. It was a very quiet week staking wise, but it was a poor week. I haven't even written down what it was in the end. It was must have been about, I think it was about £31 loss off the top of my head, something like that. It will be in the description of the video for those who want the true figure. Loads of other stats later, but the actual what we did last week, I can't remember. What it did mean is we ended up for the year we're 109 down, so that's why I've gone and done a bit of a deep dive into the stats. So not in great shape as the calendar year goes. History of channel, fine. If you go last 2 months, rubbish. Last 3 months, 2 or 2.5 months, not great. And then if you stretch it to 3.5 months, it's okay. So longer term, we're fine. Shorter term, in the last couple of months, really, really bad. Not in, no one's losing their house, hopefully, if unless you're betting silly money, but nowhere near where we'd want it to be. So I've gone through the stats, and that's what I'm going to go through at the end of the video to kind of. It's just useful to go through for never rest on your laurels. Always look at what you're doing to understand if you're on a good run, why you're on a good run, a bad run, why you're on a bad run. As you know, it's certain types of races I might do better, certain times of year might do better. So it's always tricky at the start of the year, but it's useful to run the stats and see what it can tell you, or how it can shape what you're doing going forward. And there will be some tweaks on the betting plan going forward. So, and then what do we have? Golf. We only had one goal for Nacho Vera. It was only 2 shots out the frame in the end, so it was a decent enough performance for 100 to 1 shot, but nothing on that. And then I think I've only had one horse in the comments because we had one horse from the staking plan run Sunday, pulled up the 4th fence or something like that. So yeah, I think that might be the last we see of third wind on a race course. We'll see. So then that was it for Sunday. I think it was Monday. I put one horse up in the comments. I think I put it up at 40s. I think it SP'd at 10s, but was way down the field. Well, not way away. It wasn't like loads of places out of the placings. It was very, very far away though. So right ballpark from a value perspective as far as the market was concerned, not in terms of finishing position. And then there was nothing on Tuesday. So that sort of brings us up to date. So let me do Wednesday's bets. Then we'll do Cheltenham anti-post, handicap explanation, and then I'm going to go into these stats for those that want it. So first up on the plan for Wednesday is this horse. Single only is what I've decided. I was having a debate about single only versus putting it into a multiples bet versus leaving it out entirely. It's 2 o'clock in Hereford. Aldounis or Aldounis, maybe go Aldounis girl. 125 to 1 is available in most bookmakers at the current time of making this video. 50p each way single, it's a £1 bet. So explanation on this horse. So those of you who are fairly eagle-eyed to the channel know that this trainer jockey ownership combination is something that I have been keeping a little bit of an eye on. So I'll give a little bit of a long explanation. So explain. Part of the gig, right, sometimes in this game is noticing the things before everybody else has noticed it, right? So once everyone else has noticed it, it's no good to you anymore. So noticing something before somebody else notices it. And part of the thing I've got to do on YouTube is, how much do I tell you what I notice before I literally just give everything away? And therefore, then anything I'm telling you I notice, because of the amount of people that might watch this, things then impact the market later down the line. Got a bit of a judge on that thing, haven't I? But I'll give you the explanation on how doing this girl. So it's trained by Deborah Cole. Most people won't have come across particularly unless you're sort of an avid racing fan. Chris Ward is the jockey. Likewise, he rides for her. And then the ownership is the Knoll Racing Club Syndicate, something like that. So my gut says, because she's based in Knoll, which is in Warwickshire, that she's some sort of part owner, runs a syndicate in relating to the stable, something like that. I don't actually know that. That's my assumption, right? That bit of it is hiding here. What you do notice is, if you actually track through the horses, they dabbled a few times. I had a couple of horses, and then the last couple of years they've ramped it up a little bit. And what they're showing is a really good pattern, usually, of picking up horses. Quite often they are point-to-point horses, sometimes French horses, and they then bring them over here, and they put them into novice hurdle races, and they do nothing. They go handicap hurdles, they do nothing, and then as soon as they go into a handicap chase, they suddenly come into their own, because that's basically what they were bred for. They're bred for that. And this horse sort of feels in that sort of bracket. So I am taking it here in a maiden hurdle with precaution, in the sense of it was too big a price to leave alone. If it was, say, 40s, I probably wouldn't have put it up on the channel, but 125s, there's enough margin in there. Now, I'm looking at the profile of the horse. It's not as good as some of the ones that they've had through their hands in the last couple of years. But my read of it is that the plan for the horse is, and this is where they excel, is middle distance chase. So 2.5 up to 3. That sort of area of chase mark. That's where the specialty is. If you look at strike rate for that particular combination, it's really, really good. Both in terms of win strike rate, place strike rate. If you just go on handicap chases for those ones, you're knocking on 50% frame strike rate. It's really, really strong, albeit small sample. So some of the horses that don't run completely void of ability in some of these races, and this is basically a juvenile hurdle race. So young horses, and you've got a lot of horses that haven't ridden over jumps before, including this one. It's only gone on the bumpers a couple of times, but they're stepping it up in distance, and there's a bit more cut in the ground. It ran over 1.6 miles bumpers on good ground, so little bit of a change of scenario, up in distance a little bit, slightly softer ground, and over jumps. That, in theory, is what, from a breeding point of view, suggests is probably going to be a bit better for it. My gut says it's a horse that I want to keep an eye on it, and if they keep it long enough to then send it over handicap chase, first time out handicap chase is where I would be wanting to punt it, really. But 125s, given that I don't think the horse is completely void of promise, and the race is very, very weak for the grade. It's really, really weak. So there isn't really kind of standout horses. So it's primed for a type of, and if you look at this, these are types of races that are really helpful to look at sometimes. It's primed for something to get in the frame that you wouldn't expect from a price point of view, because it's really, really hard for a bookmaker or anyone else to price the market up. So, with these sort of races, I haven't gone through and priced every single horse up, because it's very, very difficult. What I look for is anomalies, and I keep an eye on this particular combination. So, long explanation for a horse that will probably come 7th. But what I would say to you, it's for anyone who's using 365, it's probably worth having a look at the extra place market, 4 to 6, something like that. It's not what I would call a traditional horse I would put up to sort of say 4 to 6, because it absolutely could come last. It's one of those ones. It's not going to show its true form properly, I don't think, till middle distance chase. But I think at 125's main market, it was worth dabbling. That's in. There we go. Right, let's get on to the rest of it. So this bet, there was a bit of debate for me on this one. 320 Fontwell. At the time making the video, there is an inspection at Fontwell for potential waterlogging, depending on how much rain. And since I've done all the stats, which I'll get to, this horse wouldn't have been in had I prior to this week. So since I've gone through the stats, so this is a horse that I've changed some stuff, and I'll get to that later. But Nashville Nipper is in. So if it's a non-runner by the time you're watching the video, because Fontwell's been abandoned, then you've got 4 races at Dundalk that you can convert then to a 20p each way Yankee. So I thought I'd do it that way rather than leave it out entirely. So 210 Dundalk. Fraser's mentioned this in the comments from the last video, something along the lines of, am I going to be looking at Honky Tonk Angel? Hell yeah, I'm looking at Honky Tonk Angel. Right? If you look at their form, I don't think you need a degree to figure out that horse is not that price. There's something strange going on there. Now, it's a Luke Homer horse. There's loads of Luke Homer horses running at Dundalk this on Wednesday. You'll see there's a couple of them more in my combination double bet, but I've left them off this one. But hands down, that's the biggest overpriced horse at Dundalk at the time of making this video. You can get 50 to 1 in places. I think Paddy and Betfair 50 to 1. Just a silly price, right? So two runs ago, the horse won, and I think it's got up £6 from that. But the first 2 were really well clear, and the horse that was really well clear with has gone on to finish second in a handicap hurdle. So that form's pretty good on its own. And then you look next time out, it wasn't far away. I think it was 5th or 6th. I think it was 6th on the same sort of race. So there's not an obvious reason why the horse should run a bad race. It's a competitive race, 100%. You're not going to make that horse the favourite. But 40 to 1's an absolute joke of a price for a horse that probably should be about 12s. So whether the market will ultimately agree, I don't know. But what I can tell you is it's the best value horse of the day at 40 to 1. It's a Luke Comer horse. They run massively inconsistently, so you have to just be very careful with what you're doing. If you back them all blindly, you'd lose. But they will pop up at big prices. But that horse, yeah, just a silly price. 240, and well done Fraser for flagging it. 240 Dundalk. That was the most tricky of those the four decent field size handicaps at Dundalk. I least liked that 6 furlong one. I've gone with no speed limit. So 11 to 1. 320 as mentioned, Fontwell. Nashville Nipper at 20s. Then the 410 Dundalk, Curious Bride at 14s. 440 Dundalk, General Idea at 20s. 10p each way Canadian. There was an amendment here because Nashville Nipper actually drifted before I made the video. So 50p each way singles, 50p win singles, no speed limit and Curious Bride, the two smaller prices. 50p, that's 3 of them, 50p each way singles, Honky Tonk Angel, Nashville Nipper, General Idea. That's 50p each way singles on those 3. 920 is the bet. Sky come out best because there's 3 of the 4 Dundalk races they're offering 5 places. Then you've got 365 or Paddy because you get a best price guaranteed. And then most of the usual ones I'd mentioned, Hills 888, Unibet, Betfred, Betway, and the one I've added in there, now it seems to be everywhere at the moment, their marketing budget must be huge, but BetMGM seemingly are trying to compete in this market. Now I can't say to you I've used BetMGM, so if anyone has used them, please can you let anyone know in the comments whether or not you would kind of rate them. I don't mean rate them as in I'm sure they're like everybody else, you'll get restricted, but in terms of actually user friendly, I've not even been on the app or seen anything. So I'm saying that they're fine for place terms, but I'm not going to tell you that I've ever used BetMGM, so I can't comment on that. It's kind of firmly on my list now as they're sort of becoming a big player. The way you can check this often is if you go on Oddschecker. Clearly, the bookmakers that are first in the list are the ones that are paying Oddschecker more money to advertise. So BetMGM have sort of appeared, and they're now moving up and up and up and up with some of the big players. So yeah, if you've used BetMGM and you got a view, please feel free to share it with others. And I'd be curious to know myself because I just haven't got around to opening an account for BetMGM yet. But yes, I will do. So that's that. Then the double of the day is this 210 Dundalk, Honky Tonk Angel 40s, going on to 7:30 Kempton, Renardo. We backed it last time, it underperformed. I'm going to stick faith with it again at 16s, 45p each way double, 90p is the bet. 365 on Paddy because it's basically 4 and 3 with most bookmakers. There's a couple that aren't, so 365 on Paddy. You'll get the bog on the double, or otherwise Sky, Hills, Betfair, Betfred, Betway, Unibet, or indeed MGM. What I would say about the Dundalk selections, and another one, because eagle-eyed people will spot this, in that Dundalk bet, 3 of those horses have got the same jockey, James Ryan, different trainers. And I wouldn't say I didn't deliberately pick James Ryan horses, but it was no bad thing that I found myself on his horses, I would say. So he's a pretty good up-and-coming claimer. And again, under the banner of try and spot things before lots of other people spot things, he's getting a little bit on a hot streak at the moment. And I'm not massively led by jockey form per se, although I am put off sometimes by lack of jockey form. But with James Ryan, he's first 19 runs of the first 30 days of this year, 19 runs, no winners, and then he's at 4 winners in the last 12 runners for 3 different trainers. And the thing to watch for someone like that when they're a claimer, and they're at this point now we're claiming 5, some of them tend to be retained jockeys for certain yards, and he's certainly got an affinity with a couple where he's riding more for. But what's a very big positive in his book is that he's riding for lots of different trainers, and that is telling you that people are putting faith in him around and about. So yeah, I think he's one to keep an eye on. Whether or not ultimately that converts when they lose their claim, different matter. But at the moment, he's looking good value for £5 claim. So it was not completely coincidental. but I wasn't specifically looking for his horses, is the thing to say. So there happens to be 3 of his horses in that bet. He's got 5 rides in total at Dundalk on Wednesday, and I've got 3 of them in that bet. So let's hope James Ryan has an absolute screamer at Dundalk. So that's that. Bet 4, we've got Dundalk, the 1.5 mile handicap. So basically I've got my 2 preferred selections, and I've put in a bit of a Luke Comer rogue horse in each leg. So 4:10 Highland Train we've added in for Luke Comer. Handicap debutant. If you go on its last race, and that's the only decent bit of form, you'd say it actually looks quite well handicapped. Whether that actually means it's well handicapped, whether that actually means that it will run to form this time, who knows. But if you look at the mark it was given, it looks fair. So in terms of a handicap mark, and then if you also look at the horses around it when it finished in that last race, or what they've gone on to do, you'd say the form stacks up reasonably well. So Highland Train 28s, Curious Bride at 14, and then the 440 General Idea at 20s, and I've added it in Emperor Silk, which we've taken a few times, which inconsistent horse. I think that's the rogue one in the sense that I think it might be Luke Combs. If it's if you're watching, Luke, sorry, I forgot it's out of turn. It's Mrs. Comer, so I don't know if that is like his wife or another relative. Don't know. Still owned by the Comers, but not running in the same colours. 33-1. So it's 24 times 25p each way doubles. So you put them all in your bet slip. 4 times 25p each way doubles, and then 2 extra singles. Highland Train, Emperor Silk. That takes it to £4 your bet. Sky are 5 on both, so Sky win out. Then you want a bog bookie, but Ladbrokes and Coral are all right for this one. 365 Paddy, and then any of the non-bog paying bookies. That's bet 4, and we will finish off with 7 o'clock Kempton. All the last 4 races at Kempton. So if the rest of it's gone down the pan, here we are. 7 o'clock Kempton, blind beggar 9-1, and to say I was quite happy with this in that they're not loads of extra place races. The 8:30 is an extra place race, offering 4 with most bookies. 2 places 3 and 3, and they're dead 8 runners. If they hold at dead 8 runners, I'll be really happy with that. In terms of from a place terms point of view, paying 3 places 8 runners at those prices, I think it's a good bet. So 7 o'clock Kempton, blind beggar 9s, 7:30 Kempton, Renardo 16s, 8 o'clock Kempton. Pablo Prince, bit inconsistent but worth the price, and then 8:30 Kempton. Form read looks like it could be improving still. Red Dwarf 14s, 20p each way Yankee, 50p win single on Blind Beggar, 3 times 50p each way singles on Renardo, Pablo Prince and Red Dwarf. 7.90 is the bet, and this one place terms 2, 3, 3 and 4 across most bookies, literally most bookies. There's a couple of exceptions in there. I think it might be Betfair of the big ones to not do it with. So 365 Paddy, Coral, Ladbrokes, so same place terms, you get your best price guaranteed. Then Hill Sky, 88 Betway, Betfred, Unibet, BetMGM. So 7.90. And the thing to note on that one, because I've noted it on the other one, is 3 of those horses are ridden by Luke Morris, all different trainers. And that is definitely not deliberate, okay? So I like to distinguish the difference here. I am not picking Luke Morris. It's coincidental. It wouldn't be a plus point, being honest, because if you actually look statistically at his record at Kempton, it's not very good. Small sample this year, but then if you go 2023, 2022, 2021, you compare his win strike rate against all the other all-weather tracks, and his lowest win strike rate percentage was at Kempton each and every one of the last 3 years, and if on top of that the first 6 weeks of this year, right? So statistically, not a good course for Luke Morris. Doesn't mean it's completely wayward and he's got no chance, but his win strike rate is not as good as it is on any other all-weather track. So I haven't gone after Luke Morris horses. It's just worked out, and they happen to all be different trainers as well. But yeah, that's the way it goes sometimes. I've said it many times. If the only thing you don't like is the jockey, it's not enough to put you off. I don't dislike the fact it's Luke Morris. It's just not a tick in the box for me on that one. But I kind of want to express that, that sometimes there's stats and things I look at that I just don't even go through on the channel, because most people just want me to flash up good selections and find out if I win or lose, and I get that. So yeah, it's only the hardcore that are into that stuff. So that is that. Cheltenham Festival anti-post update. I should say 23 quid, yeah. Cheltenham Festival anti-post update. We've had Nickelback come out, so we had the scratching phases for the novice races, and Nickelback's come out. So that was one that was most likely to be a bit of a question mark, I think. So we're down to 3 on the main anti-post video, as well as if anyone's got Harmoniomaker as well. So that is still in the reckoning for the Mayor's Chase, and we've still got another way in Matata. They are still, if you look at outstanding price at 40s and 33s in places, if you go to, I think it's Corals or Labrooks actually, Coral and Labrooks, you can get 40s on Another Way and 33s on Matata. So that's the first 2 races of Cheltenham, Supreme Novice for Another Way and Arkle for Matata. Best price, Labrooks and Coral. And even after the scratching phase, they haven't changed price. So, those are kind of still the 2 I would in there. So Not So Sleepy, still entered the champion hurdle, but the value's gone a little bit on there. Harmoniomaker was mentioned a few months ago, the value's gone on that one. So yeah, Another Way in Matata, Labrooks and Coral is still worth a bet if you haven't done it. So a little Cheltenham anti-post double, each way double, noting that both horses might not actually run in those races, but they are still contenders currently. So that's that. I've got a really itchy nose. Oh, it's clicking as well. Just because it's not running, there's something coming out of it. It's just itching on the outside. Handicaps. So yeah, I'll give a brief mention on this because Derek was asking about it. When a horse out of the weights, right? So some of you, this is sucking eggs. For others, might be interesting. So handicaps 101. So most horses run in handicaps. Handicaps are what most races are. If a horse runs in a handicap race, basically if it wins, it is likely then to, in 99% of cases, it will go up in the handicap mark. So every single horse in training that has run 3 qualifying races, so maiden or novice races, has a handicap mark if they run in that discipline. So if it's flat, they need to run it on flat. If they then go to jumps, they need to run in 3 novice or maiden races to get the handicap mark. Some occasionally horses just go straight in there a little bit, but generally speaking, the normal way of operating is they run 3 times the novice or maiden, they get a handicap mark. You win a handicap race, your mark goes up, so it's like a score, right? So that goes up, so it might go up by 6 or 7. That means next time, if the race was exactly the same, the handicap is saying you would have 6 or 7 pounds more, heavier, so a heavier jockey or weight in your saddlebag, whatever it might be. But if that race was run again, to make it fairer, because you are the best horse on that handicap mark, you would run 6 or 7 pounds higher, 6 or 7 points higher, if that makes sense. Then depending on how the race pans out, maybe second might go up a couple of pounds, depends how clear it was. Third or fourth or fifth, you probably stay the same, and then you start getting 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, you're likely then to go lower, you might to lose points on the handicap mark. For an older horse, you'll usually lose the marks quicker. If you're really far out the back of the race, you'll start to lose it quicker. If you've lost by a long way in quite a few races in a row, the mark will drop quicker. So the handicapper, and there's different handicap rules in different parts. So there's one, a British handicapper who works for the British Horse Racing Association, one in Ireland, France, it's all different. The marks are slightly different as well. But so if you run well, your mark will go up. Run indifferently, your mark might stay the same. Run badly, your mark goes down. So next time, your rating changes, therefore, in the same class, you're likely to have a slightly lowering weight. So the handicap mark means low weight. So when it says out of the weights, it means the horse is qualified to be in that class of race, but because the best horse in the race in terms of mark has to be at certain ceiling, it depends on the type of discipline, jumps or flat, whatever, and then whoever is the best horse in the race, they'll start as top weight, and then everybody else's marks, if they start with 9 stone 12 and they're on 68, if a horse is on 66, they're on 9.10. If a horse is on 64, they're on 9.8, and it runs down. So you could have a horse entered, there'll be a basement weight mark. So if 9 to 12, it might be that the lowest mark might be 8 stone 4. So technically, if your handicap mark's really low, you might should be on 8 stone 2, but the basement of the race is 8 stone 4, therefore you would be £2 out of the weights or £2 out of the handicap, which means you'd be carrying £2 heavier than your mark. So if your mark was say 48 and you were £2 out of the weights, it actually means you're running to a mark of 50. So it happens in certain races. I guess a relevant example would be if you look at Tuesday, horse running in the long distance chase at Lingfield, Max Dynamo. I think a few people were mentioning it in the comments. That's a horse, if you actually look at the history of it, there's a number of times that's run in races where it's been out of the weights and out of the handicap mark. So it's been running in quite considerably, quite noticeable, sometimes £10-12 higher than what its mark is. So people do that sometimes because they think the handicap has not got the mark right, and therefore they still think the horse has got a chance, or certainly got a chance of making some place money. They think it's worthwhile doing that. If a horse is significantly out of the weights, it doesn't really make sense to run it out of the handicap. But sometimes it comes down to, if there's a particularly good quality top horse in that, it means a load of other horses can run outside of the handicap mark. And in occasional situations, if it's like some sort of, you've a horse that's run 3 novice races and it's making its handicap debut and it says £10 out of the weights, that might not be a bad thing. It might just be a sign that the trainer thinks that horse is actually a lot better than what the handicap marks put it in on. So hopefully that's helpful, Derek, and anyone else who's interested in terms of how that works. So yeah, a lot of what I do is I look at ratings, look at handicap marks. I'm looking for horses often that are basically back down to a mark where they've previously run particularly well. So whether they've won on that particular mark before or in and around that mark, you often find that horses get put up £6. They might run 6-7 races and they don't get anywhere, and then they get back down to the mark and the handicap mark where they won previously, and lo and behold, they go and run a nice race again. So it's a good starting place to look at when you're looking at horse racing forms, to go and look at the handicap mark. Okay, that's that. We're already 32 minutes in. Let's go through some stats. I have made some notes because there's a lot of more stuff than I could possibly retain in my head for this one. So what I wanted to go through, so statty run. So forgive me from turning away and looking at my notes on occasion here. This year's total so far is £467.50 on, 353.82 back. That's a loss of £109.35. That's a 24% deficit, right? So pretty bad. So last year, what we were on, 16-17% overall profit. Year before was particularly good on 30-odd%. So minus 24 is pretty rubbish. Now that's a small sample, right? So we're sort of not even a 10% really through the year. So you'll always have an artificial swing. It could be looking good or bad. And for the month of February, we're already down 71.48. So that's not great from a stat point of view. Worst month ever on the channel, September last year, we lost £162. So we are sort of almost halfway through this month, and we are about just under half of that. We did have months last year where we lost 123 and 117. So if you're newer to the channel, there is context here that there were 3 months last year where we lost over £100. We are lost 71. We could double that loss and it could be looking at competing for 160. We might start plateauing and not lose any more to be even. We might hit a spike and come out ahead still. Still all to play for. In terms of actual bad run, right, it is a real bad run that we're on at the moment. We have had worse, but we're on a bad run. 21 videos since I've had a £20 profit day. So that feels pretty horrible. I mean, I know from my own personal profit and loss, like just going down and down for this year. But yeah, it's not a million miles from where we were last year, but 21 videos since a £20 day is pretty ropey. The best win we've had this year is £67. So we've had numbers of wins over the years of doing the channel with 100, 200, 300, whatever, £400 win days. 67 is the best we've had this year. If you compare that to last year, in January, February, March, we had a torrid time of it. 52 was the best winning day we had in January, February, March last year. So actually having a day of 67 is actually better than that. So we could go to the end of March and not have a day better than that, and that actually, for that statistic, it would look better. 2022, we at the end, up until the 23rd of February, we hadn't have a day as good as that. And then we go and hit, in the last 6 days of February in 2022, we hit £200 days. So, yeah, what does it? What those tell you? It tells you that, excuse me, in January, February, March, having a really decent day in terms of what I'm doing is harder to come by. So a lot of the bigger days have come in the latter half of the year. Not necessarily because that's all where the best racing is, but the biggest impact is a lot of what I do is based on volume. And at this time of year, there is lower volume. So I'm getting less involved in the small field jumps. That's not really what I'm into. And in terms of just looking at field sizes, generally speaking, they are much smaller at this time of year. More meetings get abandoned. That has an impact as well. And the 3-year-olds have entered open company, 4-year-old upward company on handicaps on the all weather, which does impact some of those results as well. So that's generally a bit of an overview. So what I've done the last, since Saturday, I've run a whole bunch of stats. So I was looking at results for the first 6 weeks of 2024 to compare it with the first 6 weeks of 2023, first 6 weeks of 2022. And I like to be, for stuff like this, for the channel, I only want to use channel stats, right? So this is not using my own stats. I'm not going to go back in an archive and look at later periods of time and that kind of stuff. I want it to compare with the channel, because what I'm trying to do with the channel is replicate a much smaller version of what I do in real life, and trying to get the same sort of percentage yields. And so, that's the ultimate aim in what I'm trying to do. I find it not useful in the context of the channel to talk to you about stats that aren't relevant or you don't know about, because they're nothing to do with what we've done. So everything I'm talking about, you can go, if you had a calculator, you could go and figure it out yourself. Look to the stats for those, and I've also done a comparator to so it's the first 6 weeks of the year, to compare what is the last 6 weeks of the year, so December, November, on both 2023 and 2022 look like as comparators. So I've basically got 5 blocks of 6 weeks, 3 that are like for like on the same time of year, and then 2 at the back end, to compare what's the difference between the back end versus the front end of the year, to see if there's any difference, because we're still talking about jump racing and all weather. And then compare how does the first 6 weeks of a calendar year compare on the history of the channel, to look at where am I doing better, where am I underperforming, and then I can make some decisions about that. Okay, hopefully at this point you've already worked out whether or not this is for you, or whether you're just sitting there going, what are you going on about? I'll try and explain it as best I can, and I'm absolutely trying to not go too much into stuff that people won't understand. So in terms of what I've broken that down into, is then looked at what are the results for UK jump racing, Irish jump racing, and then all of the all-weather tracks, all broken down separately, because the volume of horses I put out on those is much higher compared to overall any other tracks on the jump scene. So GB stats, or UK GB race jumps stats, Irish jump stats, and then each all-weather track, including Dundalk, as well as stats for Meydan, because we do a bit of Meydan usually on a Friday. So to go through those, I then compare it to sort of see where it comes out. So what I found was, and I did win bets as well, win only bets. So we literally hardly done any win only bets, and I look back to actually 2022 when the channel started. And I know why, for good reason. I was doing a lot more win bets, and at this time of year generally was having a pretty good result on win bets. So one of the thoughts is I'm going to have a look where I can. There wasn't anything I liked for Wednesday for a win bet, but I will look at introducing a bit more win bets, because the stats from 2022 were pretty healthy. And part of it is, as I've touched on this a little bit, I'm just careful with my words, part of it helps from a tracking point of view, because it varies the types of bets that you put, and it varies the value margin. So when I'm doing win bets, I'm doing them because I think there's value in there, but the value is much thinner, and therefore it's helpful to have more of a variety in your bets with your betting account. All right, some of you get that. So it helps. And I've moved away from doing that. I was trying to make life easier for myself and just do less volume and less horses. And I've moved away from that. But it can be really useful. Yeah. So what have I found so far in the stats? So yeah, less win bets. So I'm going to look at introducing some more. Generally, the volume of jumps horses in the first 6 weeks of this year compared to last year and the year before, I've got a roughly 50% reduction in volume. That's quite significant. So back in September last year when I changed all the stats, I put in a more stricter criteria about the threshold for the price a horse needed to be before I put it on the channel, and the selection criteria. And I think that's partly impacted that volume, but I think also that volume has been impacted just by smaller field sizes. But yeah, the volume of horses over the jumps in the first 6 weeks this year is 50% less than what I put up last year. What it does show is that from an Irish jumps point of view, we are still in a good place. So the stats are pretty consistent, right? So if I look at all those 5 periods I've mentioned, beginning of 24, 23, 22, back end of 23, 22, the percentage of frame strike rate is pretty solid. So for the example being for Irish jumps at the start of this year, in the first 6 weeks, we're 40% frame strike rate. So generally speaking, as you'll know, Irish jump racing, I'm looking at a bigger price, but 40% of them are framing. Wins are hard to come by, but framing is very, very good at the price we're doing. So yeah, if you blindly just backed all of the Irish horses in the first 6 weeks of this year each way, you'd be doing well for yourself. So that's in a good place. The UK jumps is not in a good place. The first 6 weeks this year, albeit the volume's down 50%, the strike rate is poor. We're down to 20% strike rate, which by my standards is really poor. And I think maybe what I've done in my sort of looking at how to reduce the volume of horses down for the channel, I think I've been a bit too tight with the price point. So my selection criteria I think is fine without going to all of that mumbo jumbo. But from a price point of view, I've been looking really at the higher end of the market and only putting them up if I like stuff in the higher end of the market, and particularly focusing much more on the class 2 stuff, which is mainly a Saturday gig. So I'm going to make an amendment on that to see if I can increase volume to improve the strike rate. So I'm going to start looking more at class 3, class 4 handicaps in the week as well. And that's where that horse from Fontwell comes from, because it wouldn't have been something I necessarily would have included at the price it was. So yeah, plan to do that. Then yeah, the other thing that's interesting actually with the overall strike rates. The overall strike rate is down. So GB racing jumps down, Irish racing good and probably slightly higher than average, but not by much. The win strike rate for this 6 weeks and the last 6 weeks of last year is actually higher. So I've been doing less horses, but the average price is higher and the win strike rate is a little bit higher. So that's really, really positive, particularly positive if all you do is back the horses win single. The channel strategy is based on frame strike rate, so horses getting in the frame doesn't necessarily mean they have to win, but getting the frame, stringing them together. So when the channel strike rate, frame strike rate goes down, that's what impacts the profit and loss more than the win strike rate, which is looking healthy, and the average price is higher. Those things are good, but those are particularly good if you're backing single only. So I'm not saying suddenly we need to switch what we're doing on the channel, but you would have you'd be in a better position if all you've been doing is backing them singles at this point, albeit 6 weeks. Then we get to the all weather. Southwell and Chelmsford are in a good place as tracks, so we don't do loads of volume on there. And actually, Southwell, the volume's really dropped off, and I'm not sure why. I wonder if there's less meetings or there's less, I think it was less racing, or less field sizes. But there's also, I think there's been a lot more Newcastle, and I don't know how it has an impact because Southwell is sort of up there with Wolverhampton in terms of like the next Newcastle out its limb. So if there's more racing at Newcastle, Southwell's in the middle. I wonder if that means because there's less trainers getting there. But yeah, the volume at Southwell's been much more reduced. But strike rate, Southwell, Chelmsford is in a good place. Kempton is lower than average, but 29% still. So frame strike rate for the first 6 weeks this year, 29%. That actually is the lowest of any of the 5 periods of time I've looked at. But I'm not worried about it. And then you've got, Lingfield and Wolves are ones where I generally struggle for a strike rate, and they are both worse than usual. So I'm going to look at limiting even more the each way horses at Lingfield and Wolverhampton. As is Meydan, not gone well so far. Meydan the last 2 years has been good, but not had a winner at Meydan yet, and actual frame strike rate is way off what it was the last 2 years. So watching brief on those. And then I kind of come to what I really think is impacting the results for the first 6 weeks this year, because last year the frame strike rate wasn't bad. I just think we were unlucky and we weren't stringing things together, and there was a couple of bits I missed. Whereas this year the strike rate is what's bringing us down, and actually root cause is Newcastle and Dundalk. So Dundalk, I'm in the lowest period of strike rates. If you just took this 6 weeks. And I look at the results, and I'm looking at the form read for Dundalk for Wednesday, and what I'm seeing is, I look back at the results, and there seems to be a whole bunch of what I would read as inconsistency in January. Horses running way below marks that for no reason. And what's hard to understand is, did something happen in January where horses ran below their mark and they're going to come back now, and it was just something off? Or is it a case of actually those horses' forms just dropped off a cliff really suddenly, because normally it fades rather than drops off a cliff suddenly, and I just need to amend what I'm doing and focus more on the horses that historically perform better in February, March at Dundalk, and forget the kind of November, December form. Hopefully that makes sense. So I've kind of got to make that judgment. So I'm not looking necessarily changing what I'm doing at Dundalk at the moment, but the next couple of Dundalk meetings are going to be informative, because I'll be looking at the January underperformers and seeing if they bounce back or whether they stay dropped off form, because that will inform what I do for the rest of the Dundalk season until it comes to a close sort of April time. Newcastle is my worry. So I've done, for whatever reason, I've looked at it and I've done a much greater volume of horses at Newcastle in this 6 week period than I've done before. I think there's been more meetings, certainly, but I think when I went back through the stats back last September, I flagged Newcastle as a track I could have a little bit more of a nudge on, in terms of the strike rate was good, and therefore I could spread my a little bit further. And I think that works up until Christmas. It certainly seemed to be working, because we had some great success at Newcastle, and then since the turn of the year it has been rubbish. So one of the things I'm going to do is tighten up my Newcastle selections. So the threshold of what it takes for me to put them is going to go up, and also the price point. I'm going to take a lot less lower prices at Newcastle than I have been doing. So that's the whistle stop tour. Ultimately, what I'm saying to you is, I'm going to reduce activity at Newcastle, be even stricter at Lingfield and Wolves, and GB jumps racing, I need to widen the net a little bit to try and increase the strike rate by looking in more races and lowering the price point. I don't know whether that makes sense to anyone else. It makes sense to me in terms of what I'm doing, but it also helps me kind of go, right, okay, I see where the problem's been. Like the volume of horse at Newcastle has been massive, and we've had an absolute torrid time of it. And therefore, if you add that together, take all those Newcastle bets out that lost us, it's not going to suddenly make us in profit, but it would it would take out a bit of a chunk of where we're down for. So yeah, I mean, all of the point of explaining all this is really to sort of say, when you get into form reading, right, stats are so important. And by doing this level of data, right, go figure. I like data. Yes, it takes time to go through all of this stuff, right? I sat there, a good few hours, quite a few hours, going through all of this stuff to pull it all together. But it tells you a story, and I'm not going to be the guy that walks around a paddock and tells you that horse looks great, it's going to run well today. I'm the guy that looks at the data and says that those prices don't reflect the horse's chances. That's what I do. So I need to go back through my data and validate what I'm doing. So I'm not suggesting that suddenly, Wednesday's meetings are suddenly going to turn a corner and it's all going to be grand again. Because you never quite know when it's going to be dropped. I like Wednesday's stuff, to be fair. And there's only one horse at Fontwell that probably would have been in that wouldn't have been. That, to be fair, was probably the only one. But there'll be lots of days now where there'll be other things that you wouldn't necessarily notice, where I'm putting a bet on that I wouldn't have put before, like a win bet. And likewise, there'll be horses that aren't going to make the grade that would have made the grade. I still want to try and keep a lower volume of horses than historically I've done on the channel. But I just need to keep a watching brief, because statistically it tracks through. The days where we do more volume, we're more likely to return a better profit. So it's not just about put 30 on, or you've made got 32 back. Actual profit, more profit. Most of the profit comes from the volume days. Most of the losses, yes, sometimes we do a £30 day and we lose it, but actually it's the small stake days that all add up. Because you're more vulnerable if you're putting out one bet, and there's a lot in the last 6 weeks where there's been days where it's been one bet, and it does impact, because you've got less to play with and less room for manoeuvre, because 4 days of one bet is the equivalent to one busy day, and so you just need one of those days to go. So all right, I've probably well over explained that. If it was at all interesting, please let me know. If likewise, if you were like, that was an absolute bore off, don't do that again, let me know. It'll be horses for courses, won't it? Some will like it, some won't like it, but there we go. As promised, a very long video for you. But yeah, all in all, what I'm saying is I'm working hard behind the scenes to try and edit and refine the strategy all the time. The results aren't where they would be. And I was super frustrated at the weekend about it, particularly because I didn't understand the data. Now I've gone through the data. At least don't change the result, but at least I understand where the problems are lying. And at times I could just turn off those taps. And if it got really bad, I could just turn off the tap. Ultimately, a lot of this is variance, and it comes back round again. Dundalk is a great example. Dundalk, I say all the time, hero and zero track. We have brilliant days at Dundalk, and we have terrible days at Dundalk. Overall, it averages out to be pretty good. Strike rate for the last 6 weeks, last 2 months actually of last year, with 36% frame strike rate. Nuts. I think we had we worked out November, December 2023. So just gone. 86 horses, 10 winners at the prices I picked. That's pretty decent. 10 winners out of 86 horses, and then we had 21 additional place horses, so 31 framed out of 86. Some really cracking results for that kind of volume of horses. The problem is variance kicks in sometimes, and I think that's what we felt a little bit this year, where it sort of tapered it back down again, because it's not been as good. All right. Have a lovely Wednesday. Enjoy your Valentine's Day, whether you are spending it with a loved one or spending it watching my videos, whichever you choose to do. One flag is I'm not sure with Wednesday night's video. I haven't got anything romantic planned. Although, me and Mrs. FC, we've got a class. I won't go into that. I'll let you have a mystery of what that might be. But I'll be back late, so I'm just not sure about video timings. There's an outside chance it might be a Thursday morning quick vid as opposed to a Wednesday night one. But don't think that's because I'm doing anything particularly romantic with Mrs. FC. We're a card sharing kind of a household, rather than a lavish gift and 5 times the amount of money you'd normally pay for roses. So romance is not dead in my life, but just don't go big on it on Valentine's Day. All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.